What was that walkout music? I just, as long as it wasn't all about that bass, no trouble, I was going to be okay with that. So here we are, post-lunch, or as what we in the speaker business call it, nap time. I'm delighted to be here. It's a little bit strange seeing what people do with ideas that you put out into the world. I remember one time I had a conversation with a guy who had read the original Extreme Programming book, bought into it, loved it, and he was now an itinerant couch surfing tango instructor. I thought, I'm not sure that's something for me to be proud of, but here we have Rise8, who've taken those same ideas, and I don't know how much dancing is involved, but certainly they built a thriving business out of it, so that's very gratifying to see. My name is Kent Beck. Gene Kim has been coaching me about how to introduce myself, so he's going to give me feedback about this, and it'll be brutal, but you don't have to listen to that part. So my name is Kent Beck. I'm not just one of the 17 signatories of the Agile Manifesto. I'm the first signatory. Alphabetically. So it is Beck et al., to my eternal delight. I got started with patterns for software development, which is a way of speaking more precisely about software design. Wrote the XUnit family of testing frameworks. Rediscovered test-driven development. Turns out they used TDD on the Mercury spacecraft. They typed in the expected values, and then they programmed until those were the values they got. So I can't claim to invent it. Extreme programming, 3X, the explore, expand, extract model. And most recently, I culminated 18 years of work in a book called Tidy First about software design. It took me 18 years to write a book about software design, and it's only 90 pages long. But I'm persistent, even if I'm not productive, so there we go. And a year ago, I had seen about vibe code, or whatever we were calling it then, assisted coding. I'd used autocomplete. I thought it was pretty magical, except it was so very, very limited. But it wasn't kind of on my radar that I might want to use these tools. And a year ago, almost exactly, this week, I went to a presentation by Gene Kim and Steve Yegi, where they just enthused about vibe coding so hard that, like a tuning fork, I resonated to the same frequency. I'm like, okay, I could do this. Here's the magic for me of what I call augmented development. I don't like that phrase, vibe coding. I call it augmented development because for me, it feels like an exoskeleton. I'm the programmer. I'm still programming, but I can pick up stuff that I never would have been able to pick up without this assistance. So that's why I use that phrase. So I went home from that workshop, and the magic is I've been programming 50 plus years. I have so many projects in my head of I'd like to build this. I'd like to just the other day I thought early Pascal compilers compiled to a bytecode called P code. And I knew that as a fact, but I never looked into the details of P code. And I thought, I could write a P code interpreter. I really could. And that's just one of the million projects that are sitting in the back of my head. And for me, that's the magic of this. It is a moment of great dislocation. A lot of people are very afraid, and it makes sense to be aware of the magnitude of the change. But that doesn't need to turn into fear or panic. So, what I'm talking about today is I was trying to, whenever I get into the weeds and get a little too anxious about what's going on, I want to take a step back and have some perspective about how the details I'm working on feed into that larger context. And so that's what I'm going to be presenting today is I had a moment of, clarity, insight, relief, definitely relief, about how the day-to-day workings of software play into all these changes that we're seeing now. Did the clock start at 45? Yes? Okay, super. I made that mistake. I was in Australia. I looked at the clock a bit into my speech, and there were 25 minutes left. I thought, oh no. Except the clock had started when the intro started, not when my talk started. So I quickly condensed my whole talk. I came in right as it hit 0. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Dead silence. You're a half hour early. And everybody kind of stood up like confused and walked out. And I thought, I was so proud of myself for shortening my talk on the fly. Like, this is professional speaker stuff. Turned out to be a gigantic mistake. That's why I checked. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to have 45 minutes of the presentation minus however many is already gone. And then we'll have a 15-minute Q&A. There's a microphone here. One thing I noticed about this morning's presentation is nobody said diddly. If you have a question, I invite you to come up and ask the question while the presentation is going on. I would much rather have you ask the question than sit there with your question like, ugh, I can't believe he said that, and miss the rest of everything. 1. And 2, asking questions is an act of leadership. If you have that question, I guarantee there's 20 other people in the audience who have the exact same question, and they don't have the motivation to get up and ask the question. So feel free to ask. Okay. So what's the big question? The big question is, why does software development slow down? Now, this is a question that I've worked on for decades, tried to figure out ways to make sure that software development doesn't have to slow down. We have this universal experience of things go really fast and then they go slower and slower and slower, and then you prepare your resume. And so, like, why does that happen? What are the alternatives? And we talk about this in various language. We talk about tech debt. We talk about refactoring. We talk about building infrastructure and blah, 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 blah. And yet it continues to happen. So that was the question that I've been asking myself for a long time. It gets way worse with the genie. I call the coding assistant the genie, because it grants your wishes. It is not what you wanted. I just want to establish the relationship here. You're here to do stuff that I ask for, and I'm going to be disappointed. Okay. As long as we know that's the ground rules, we're okay. So with the genie, though, that decay, that slowing down, that buildup of friction happens so much faster. So if you look on my GitHub, there's a lot of projects in the last year. But there'll be a project, and then there'll be project 2, project 3, project 4, project 5, new project 2, new project 3. You'll notice I never number the first one. I remain optimistic that this time it's going to be different. If you add that together with me programming for 50 years, I'm not a very fast learner, for sure. But with the Genie, I can take the same kind of mess that I used to create with the team of 20 over the course of years. I can replicate that same disaster in weeks or days, where I get to this completely stuck spot where I just can't change anything without breaking something else. And I just want to start over. So, what does that look like? So we have, if we look at features over time, we get this fast. Now maybe here we do some refactoring so we get a little bit of a bump, but then it flattens out again. That's the curve. It's been here since my dad was programming. And there's various prescriptions for what to do about it and how to get around it. But people have noticed this for a long time. So that, combined with project 2, project 3, project 4, 5, 6, new project, that gave me the motivation to let's really dig into this. What is really going on here? And so I was playing with this graph, trying various different things about it, and I was still not making progress. It was not like I could graph. The Tidy First book talks about the optionality of software. There's 2 sources of value in the software. There's the cash flows for the features you have today, and then there's the optionality of the features that you could add in the future. And you'll pay money for that optionality even before you have those features. So I was trying to figure out, all right, well, what does that look like? Do I do 2 different graphs, and are they stacked? And how can I get a pie chart in here and get the designers to really lose their shit? And then I remembered, I was out walking on the beach, and I remembered a lesson from Edward Tufte, whose book, The Visual Display of Quantitative Information, is fantastic. It's a mind rewiring book. And what Tufte said is, if you want to look at the causal relationship between 2 variables, do not have time as an axis. So I thought, okay, well, what does that look like? What if we take features, not all of that, you idiot. Programs. I'm beginning to think this whole computers thing was a bad idea. Okay, so if we have features on one axis, and I played with various wording for this, but the word I like to talk about is futures. And it's the interplay of these 2 sources of value that we're trying to find a better path through. So we start out with lots of futures, lots of options. We could implement many different things first, but we have to implement something first. And when we do that implementation, by necessity, we constrain our future actions to some degree. We either have to keep that previous feature working, or we have to take the time to tear it out before we put in another feature. So our futures always are getting constrained. Now, what happens with the genie? You get the finger guns, right? You've seen the finger guns, where you put in a prompt and it goes, gada. Gotcha, boss. I finished that. Do you want me to implement the next feature? Now, the temptation, of course, is to say yes. But the genie doesn't care about futures. Happy to have big, long files, complicated structures, extra layers of indirection, a bunch of stuff that I would fire me for if I implemented it. So it implements the next feature, and the next one, and the next one, and every one, it's burning futures. You can feel it. You can feel the model start to slow down, and people say, oh, context pollution, you should condense the content. The code sucks. That's why you're having problems. And eventually, you get to what they call in the nuclear power industry, going solid. Going solid sounds like a good thing. It is not a good thing. It means you no longer have any options for future action. You're out of control. You got what you got, and that's it. And that's the trajectory that I would see with large teams of people programming with the meat fingers over a long period of time. I made that up just now, just for you. You're welcome. So you'd see that after 2 years, and the senior engineers are like, we're not paying down enough tech debt, and the product people have faster, more feature, you know, the dance of death that we're all used to. Woof, I'm a little, I was about to say cynical, maybe reflective is a better word for today. Well, you tell me when we're finished. Okay, so that thing that used to take 100 person hours now takes 1 person hour and $5,000 worth of tokens or whatever it is. We get to that same spot where you can't add anything new without breaking something else. And the genie is particularly unhelpful at that moment, because it will claim that it's implemented the new feature, and maybe it has by breaking all the other features. And it's still going to give you the feature guns. All the tests are passing. All the tests that I ran are passing. You know, I have 5 kids. I've heard that stuff before. So I'm going to ask some questions before I let it go on. So if that's what we want to avoid, if this is the trajectory that's just going to naturally emerge out of back and forth with the genie or with larger teams of people, what is the alternative? So the alternative is start the same place. We have the same first feature. You can't implement a feature without reducing your optionality. It's just not possible. You can try and do it. People will say that they're doing it. I don't believe it. But now we have a choice point. We got the finger guns. Finish that feature. Do you want the next one? And we have a choice. We can say, nah, not yet. Show me the structure of the code. Explain how this scenario works. Are we missing a test for this? What does the coverage look like? Run a mutation tester. We have lots and lots of things we can do which restores the optionality of the software and then some in preparation for the next feature. But in order to do that, 1, you have to know what those tricks are, and 2, you have to take the time to do it. And then we implement the next feature, and again, we have a choice point. This file, this happened to me Friday, that file seems to be getting kind of long, and it was ARM64 assembly code. I love this stuff. I am in hog heaven. I get to like monitor level 2 cache invalidations and all kinds, just every scrap of useless knowledge I picked up in 50 years of programming, it's all coming together right now in these moments between the features. When I was in music school, that's its own long story, but we only have 24 minutes and 35 seconds. So when I was in music school, they tell a story about Pablo Casals, who was arguably the 20th century's greatest cellists. And turns out he didn't actually tell this story, but it's such a good story that I'm going to pretend that he did. So the cello is a big, heavy instrument. It takes a lot of physical, both hands, just to get sound out of it. And Casals was playing this piece, which was long runs of 16th notes. On and on and on. And someone said to him, "Don't you get tired playing all those 16th notes like that?" And his answer was, "No, I rest between the notes." As a music student who was just trying desperately to play fast enough, the thought that there was space between the notes was just mind-blowing. But there is, if you think of it that way, and there's space between the features if you think of it that way. Now, of course, you're going to have pressure from the outside to get more done in less time with fewer programmers, with less skill and less motivation, but that's a whole separate set of issues. There is space between the features to figure out what just went on and add some more optionality. And the next, and the next, and the next. The cool thing about this trajectory is that if you just look at this, it looks like the software is getting more features and more possibilities at the same time. Now, you know and I know that it's not at the same time, that it's this rapid alternation between feature and future and feature and future that produces that effect. But that is something that is available to all of us. Now, we have new tools, and either scary or exciting thought is we get to use these tools to teach us in all kinds of different ways. So one of my my Claude inspiration moments was I'd written about systems that oscillate. And somebody wrote back to me and said, well, of course, if the eigenvalue of the system is a complex number, you're going to get oscillation. Okay. I spent a lot of my life trying not to learn about eigenvalues. And I succeeded until that moment. And I thought, all right. You know, I know some matrix arithmetic, but I just hadn't dug in that far. So I thought, hey, Claude, teach me about eigenvalues. Like I'm I don't remember, wasn't a kindergartner, it was eager teenager or something like that. Out came this explanation, and I went, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. And like, oh, you're absolutely right, boss. I had that backwards. Thanks. And half an hour later, I had a gut sense for what it meant for an eigenvalue to take a complex value. Oh, okay. So I don't believe in the phrase attention deficit disorder, because I do not have a deficit of attention. I have way too much attention. I just get bored really, really easily. So I call it boredom sensitivity. So for the boredom sensitive among us, this is amazing because I can go from Victorian architecture to biochemistry to eigenvalues to the history of the Roman Empire and just all day long. And have the genie teach me about stuff, and then I just have to go check to make sure it's not just bullshitting me. We can use that as a resource to help us regain optionality in the software. I became obsessed with, so I wanted, one of my experiments was, can I write a library quality data structure? So I picked the B+ tree, which is this balanced tree, blah, 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 complicated, hard to get right. And I thought, well, let me implement it in Rust. This is one of the amazing things about the genie. I'll say this more strongly than I believe. Programming languages do not matter anymore because you can learn a new one as you're implementing your first feature. And it works just fine. That's not exactly true, but it's close enough to true. So I started this project in Rust. I got a ways into it. I see something in the Rust code, single quote, bracket, close bracket, curly brace, rabbit emoji. I said, what does that mean? And then Genie says, oh, that's blah, 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 the type came from the other type, except not anymore, whatever it was. I thought, oh, and ask a few more questions, and now I know something about Rust that I didn't know before. I wasn't blocked because I didn't know it, but that's one of those vertical jumps. If I now understand more about the programming language, there's more things that I can now implement. And, so I had another version of the same data structure, but I did it on the GPU instead of doing it on the CPU. And it's been a long time since I've done GPU programming. So it came up with some structure, and the tests all passed, seemed to pass. I'm pretty sure they passed. And, but I didn't quite understand what was going on. So I said, write me a fairy tale that explains the multi-fetch operation. And said, well, there was a queen, and she lived in a castle with the library, and blah, 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 blah. And out came this engaging little fairy tale about that included the vocabulary. We call that a slab. And sure enough, that's what they actually call it in GPU programming. And not that you should turn everything into a fairy tale, but you should definitely turn one thing into a fairy tale and see how it strikes you. But every one of us has the opportunity to try using these tools as a resource to give ourselves wider, longer, stronger reach. Doesn't mean it's easy. Nobody knows what the answers are. If there's a theme of what I've written about in the last year, it's nobody knows. And this is profoundly disconcerting to people because for 25 years, we had this playbook. And somebody would come to you and say, well, we have this problem, and I'd look in the playbook, and I'd say, oh, well, you need a microservice, or you need CI/CD, or do TDD, or try this kind of refactor. Like the playbook was there, and you just picked stuff out of the playbook. All of a sudden, the playbook's gone. Should we use unit tests with augmented development? Nobody knows. It's not just that I don't know, it's that nobody knows. And people whose egos were built on knowing the playbook are suddenly bereft. They don't have that to rely on anymore. But nobody does. we're all back to zero as far as what's an effective programming workflow. How often should you talk to customers and what kind of ways? Yes?
I don't really understand what you mean that you don't know, especially because you helped push forward for test-driven development. And because, I mean, when we write prompts, right, for like Copilot or GitHub on these teams, and we define these like structural limitations, right? So say you're using it through Excel or Word, we have like prompts in there, and we have tests for those prompts, and we develop it with test-driven development. Wouldn't we be using something similar when we develop our own products? It already defines guardrails for what shouldn't be working, so, you know what I mean? Like,
that makes perfect sense to me, and I'm not sure it's correct.
why not?
Because the landscape has changed. All the trade-offs that so shorter feedback loops are better because the trade-off looks like this. And the trade-offs have all shifted, so maybe longer feedback loops are better. I don't believe
There's no trade-off from using test-driven development to make sure that we're not going to be having
sure
those.
Sure there is, because there's a bunch of other stuff that you're not doing if you're doing that. For example, do we go with examples in TDD style, or do you use property-based tests where you try and say for all kind of stuff? I don't know. Nobody knows. Okay. How is and not just which is better, but which is the genie going to respond to better? We don't know. Nobody knows. Highly modular code that's very easy for a human to read, is that better for augmented development? Worse? The same? Doesn't matter? Nobody knows.
What's your opinion on that specific matter for modular code? Because like,
well, I spent very many hours writing 2 books about crafting individual characters so other human beings could comprehend them. I'm kind of thinking that's a buggy whip sort of skill, that it just doesn't matter anymore.
It doesn't matter for us or for the AI?
Well, us together, because we're doing augmented. I'm still a programmer, and I'm still programming. I'm making many of the same decisions I ever made, but there's other decisions that I'm not making now, and I don't know. If you have strong opinions about this, try it. Mm-hmm. Talk to other people about it. See what you think. Be sure to include some young people in that conversation. I love talking to young people now about programming because they're like, Pops, you just don't get it. And they might be right, or they might be some right and some wrong, and I'm just thrilled as hell to still be in the game to find out which of those it is. Did that answer your question?
I don't know.
Okay, good. Well, nobody knows, so yeah.
So I am looking at your model of Genie programming with these vertical lines, and I'm finding that to be a really good answer to some of the things in 2 previous talks we've had today, where there's one thing we have to risk, which is people becoming, because so far you've talked about it like doing it on your own, but I'm trying to figure out how this model works on a team. You know, you're interacting with this Genie, trying to figure out how to make these features, but now on a team, not just you and the AI. But I think these little vertical stretches are really good opportunities. For one is to create context, which is one of the big thing of a previous talk, was creating context and preventing people from becoming isolated. Like team members are all individually trying to create features with each other, individually trying to create features. They're all individually trying to figure out how to maintain all of this stuff, but but they would come over together in, you know, pull requests, and you don't even know how to review the pull requests properly.
Pull requests. Please experiment with not having code review. I didn't say don't do it. I sure didn't say do it. I said please experiment And if you come to something and you say, boy, I sure am glad we had a code review for that, figure out something you can do upstream so that you never have to say that again. So I really appreciated John calling out multiplayer, because when I talk to the tool vendors, it's all about you and your code, and we can ignore the rest of these people. And I think that's a dangerous fiction. The response is always, well, we can make progress on single player mode, and multiplayer is hard. Boo-hoo! Extreme programming is a set of safe social rituals for people who don't like socializing. And much to my chagrin, the more I interact with other people, the more value I create. I wish that wasn't true, believe me. But it really is. And figuring out ways to include other people more in the process. Like, I'd love my genie. I have one of my gajillion projects is called Wait What? And it's for when you get the finger guns and you want to say, wait, what? One of the things I'd like the genie to do at that moment is say, oh, by the way, did you know that so-and-so is also changing that same code at the same time? You two should have a conversation. I'd like we have these infinitely powerful tools. I'd like them to be introducing me to people that I want to talk to. And that's not the direction that the industry's going. It's going to, I call it the re-soloization of programming. Because I remember being the programmer in the office with the door closed and the pizza coming underneath. And it's really easy to manage people who are working in that style. Some really smart person divides, a bunch of people do a bunch of stuff, and then you merge it together and you never have any merge conflicts in this model. Of course you do. So I think you're absolutely right. Those vertical jumps could be, hey, come let me show you how I implemented this. It was really cool. Or I learned this thing about Rust and the curly braces or whatever it is. It is an opportunity for us to connect as human beings, as well as for me as a programmer to have a deeper understanding of the possibilities of the code that I've already created.
Hell yeah.
Now, how that converts into the government space where that's just wasting taxpayer money, I have no idea. I told you, I'll let you guys work on that one. Yes, sir.
Hi. I'm going to try and say this correctly. I've been trying to figure out how to formulate it. So in test-driven development, you have to make a test that fails, figure out the minimum way to pass that test, and then refactor from there. And AI, sorry, I'm just setting the stage here.
You got it. Thank you very much.
So an AI wants to tell me what I want to hear at the end of the day.
Yes?
How do we avoid an AI writing tests that just say echo test pass and not reviewing code?
Yeah. The current answer is you can't. I have a series of live coding sessions called the Genie sessions, which is just me unscripted, farting around with whatever I feel like doing. And Monday mornings was, let me write a skill that will ensure that the Genie uses TCR. Have you heard of TCR?
I've not.
It's an alternative to TDD. So it's a programming workflow. You run the tests. If they pass, you make a commit. If they fail, you revert. So programming with the meat fingers, you type 5 lines of code, you press save, and poof, it just disappears because it didn't pass the test. Which is frustrating as all get out, but it also forces you to think, so was there a smaller step I could have taken? Could I have written 2 lines and the test would still pass, and then I add the 3rd line? Like, it's a powerful incentive to work in smaller steps. If you haven't tried it and you care about stuff like personal workflow, definitely give it a shot. So I wanted to build a skill to do that. And got a ways into the data structure that I was building, and I got the finger guns. And I'm starting to sniff those out. It said, okay, you wanted to implement deletion. The first deletion test passed, so I committed. I'm like, all the tests have to pass every time. Yeah, the genie is going to try and get away with stuff. It's like a 14-year-old. Absolutely, and wants to give you the finger guns, and that's how it gives itself its reward. If it gives you the finger guns and you don't say anything, woohoo, it won. Even if it just deleted the test, just deleted the assertions, only ran one of the tests because it wasn't sure if the other ones were going to fail, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this is definitely something that we have to manage, and we'll figure this out. How can we do this reliably? Nobody knows.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. One more question, and then I'll finish up. Yes.
This is more of a what are your thoughts on, so like keep it as short as you want.
Sure.
Before you did the zigzag ladder imaging, which I absolutely love, by the way, I thought you were going to go a completely different direction, which is like, yeah, so we always hit the bottom, cool, but we can make a new app just as fast. So we just like iterate in that. I was thinking you were going to go a completely different direction. But on that note, what are your thoughts on that? Like, I feel like this is exponentially still going to end up going down at some point at any given scale, but
Why would it go down? That like I get it, and I think we're here to decrease entropy in our code by increasing entropy in the universe.
there. Okay.
So, but I get it. So this is, to me, I love all these mysteries where the answer is nobody knows, and this mystery is, how far can you push one shot?
Yeah.
Can you, right? So if we need this many features, and we go, yeah, nope, nope. Let me do a little bit better prompting. Almost there. Little bit better prompting. Whew. Yeah, we won. Is that an effective workflow for development? For which problems is that an effective workflow? Nobody knows, but we're all experimenting, number one. And number two, as we heard from Anthropic, the models are all going to get better, and even the same prompts may get us over the finish line for the number of features that we want in a way that last week's model didn't. It feels a little like back when you'd get a new CPU and you'd plug it in and everything would just go faster. And you just had to wait for Intel to turn the crank one more time, and you'd plug in a CPU and you didn't have to program. It was kind of magical for a long time until that particular dynamic fell apart. So the open question that I'm excited about is, how far can we push one shot? Because I see the attraction of just having a bigger and bigger prompt, and then magic happens, and then we get exactly what we want. But I also deeply disbelieve the genie's motivations, and I've been embedded in this, let's make a thing that's a little bit valuable and then make it more valuable and then make it more valuable. I've been embedded in that for so much of my career that that's certainly my bias. It's the first place I'm going to try and make that kind of workflow happen. But maybe really a stupid way to do this, which is why you got to code with the kids. I talked with somebody, the principal and staff engineers were too cool to have interns. So they kind of devolved that to the senior engineers mentored the interns. And then the interns, they were all deeply embedded in AI stuff, and they did their things. And the next promotion cycle that came around, the seniors who had mentored interns were vastly overrepresented in the promotion pool. Because they'd seen the future, even if it was rough and not quite there, and they were the ones who could really effectively use these new tools compared to the distinguished engineer who's got way too much ego involvement in being very, very good at this very niche thing that they've gotten good at. That is 45, and now we have some time for some more grilling style Q&A up here.
Thanks, Kent. Appreciate it. Handling our Q&A is Rise8's own delivery lead, Purvi Desai.
Hey, everyone. Let's see, does this work?
Yes.
Hey, folks. I feel like I have an exponentially harder job now since you all asked good questions. Okay. Maybe my first question is going to be a little bit more on the practitioner side. I think Adam earlier said that we're all practitioners in this room. Earlier, we were talking about some inspiring stories. I worked for MENA. I'm a former USDSer, and I worked at the Veterans Health Administration. I was the poor platform chief that Max was talking about with those numerous outages during Operation Allies Refuge. When the rubber meets the road, and we really want to take advantage of that graph that you just showed up there, in our market segment, in government and defense, it's really hard to be able to make that balance and take that time to go up. We have new leadership, we have new mandates. Getting that next feature out sometimes is really high stakes. So what advice would you give to the practitioners here who see that, who understand that, but have to navigate it in real time?
Well, we all have to navigate it in real time. The incentives are different, for sure. And so the thing I like about talking about optionality or futures is, it sounds like a good thing. Tech debt, paying down tech debt. Well, why did you incur this tech debt in the first place, loser? Oh, that feels awful. Well, we need some time to pay down our tech debt. Oh, and after you're done, we'll have exactly the same system that we had before. How about no as an answer, right? I understand that. As opposed to, okay, we know that we're going to want to expand the system in these directions, but it's going to be really difficult to do that. So let's create the optionality to be able to make those kinds of changes much more cheaply. Oh, sure. Yeah, we definitely want to do that. So that's, the first is just changing the polarity of the presentation. The second one is learning to do those vertical jumps in little teensy-weensy chunks. So it's 5 minutes of exploration. It's, okay, we implemented it this way, but if we'd implemented it that way, how are the trade-offs going to come out different? Sing me a story. Tell me a fairy tale about how this works. And then you're back to the next feature. But things like when I was working on this Smalltalk virtual machine in assembly code, the file had gotten to 2,000 lines long, and I said, is this hard for you to understand? Oh, yeah, actually it is. Well, how about if we break that up into logically separate chunks, which can change independently of each other? Okay, I can figure that out. And At the end of that 5 minutes, I had exactly the same features I had before. Oh, it should be this way. But it was going to be easier to make changes in the future. And I had to be the one. Now, I have dreams of the day when maybe it's 2 genies, but at least somebody's looking out for my futures as well as looking out for my features. But for now, that has to be me, and I have to, this doesn't, wait, what? This doesn't make sense, or why did you implement it this way, or we have the same constant in 2 different places. Put that in one place. Just little snippets. If you make those snippets of vertical jumps small enough, nobody will even notice that you're doing it.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I think it's very applicable, and plus one to that, we could apply it right away. I want to talk a little bit about the genie.
Okay.
I grew up watching Aladdin, and I have to ask, at the end of our movie, would you ever set the genie free? I mean, Aladdin does.
When I've programmed my last program, I will. I promise.
I wanted to also follow up on a question that a teammate asked about, how to incorporate the genie into our teams and into our practices. Yesterday, we were at our company day, we were talking about, we may not have all the answers, but we do have our practices and our craft to be able to figure out how to get the answers. And part of our practices and craft is extreme programming, is paired programming. When the genie comes into play into this, our craft, what do you think about that? Is it part of it? Like, any other ideas other than code review and stuff that we already talked about how to incorporate our new teammate, our genie, our tool, whatever we want to call it, into those practices?
I get pretty squidgy about anthropomorphizing. It's so easy to do. But augmented coding is not pair programming. Because if you and I are working on a problem together, I don't have control over you. You can come up with surprises. Yes, we're having a social negotiation the whole time we're interacting, because that's what primates do. But that's completely different than if I'm sitting alone in my office with the genie. Smack. It's a completely different relationship. Now, one of the beauties about the genie being so slow is that we have plenty of time to talk. It used to be you'd wait for a compile before you'd have that conversation or go for a coffee or whatever. Now, every prompt is an opportunity to have a chit-chat about how the project's going and how your kids are doing and whatever else that we want to do. So I actually enjoy the rhythm and of two people and a genie working on a problem at the same time, because you have a lot of time to talk and reflect. And still, software development isn't a game of continually making little tiny improvements. It's making those improvements, learning the lessons, garnering the insight about what we just did to make a gigantic leap forward. And you can't exactly schedule those big leaps forward, which make people nervous about them, because what if one doesn't come? Well, then it doesn't come. Most projects fail. Is this news to anybody? But you can keep yourself from having those big insights. You can create the environment in which they're likely to happen, but a conversation between people, it's much more likely to happen than it is if I'm just sitting there buried in the next prompt, the next prompt, the next prompt.
Yeah, totally. It's been 25 years. I think just last week, Martin Fowler might have been here. You wrote the Agile Manifesto. We talked about it earlier, that you're the first, alphabetical signatory. Do we need a new manifesto for the air?
No, and here's why. The Agile Manifesto was written in 2001. I came out of college in 1984. Objects were just barely starting to hit the scene. C++ hadn't been invented yet. I was working with Smalltalk. It was clear that objects gave you, as a software developer, gave you new degrees of freedom to defer decisions out into the future. So you didn't have to front load all your decisions, because you could reasonably cheaply make that same decision in the future when the picture was more clear and you gathered more experience. But nobody knew what to do with this newfound superpower. So, do we just speed up the old cycle? Do we have a completely new cycle? People tried all kinds of stuff. Some of which sounded plausible and didn't work, some of which sounded implausible and did work, hence extreme programming. Some of which kind of made small improvements on what people were already doing. So that's 1984 to 2001. What we wrote in 2001, by the way, I only wrote one word of the Agile Manifesto because I was sicker than a dog. I had this nasty sinus infection. I was on I don't know what, and I was loopy as all get out. So there's a word daily in the principles, that you interact daily with your customers. And that word daily I put in there. And the rest of it's a complete fog. So that was, do the math, 17 years of people, lots of people, trying lots of stuff because nobody knew, just like now. Lots of people trying lots of stuff, lots of people sharing. We'd have workshops at the annual conference. We were swapping papers back and forth. So all this experimentation. There was lots of consultation of leading edge teams trying out these new techniques and seeing, well, what are the implications and how can we use that to create more value? That was 17 years. So 17 years from now, we can come back here and talk about the Vibe Coding Manifesto, and we will write it from a position of experience, thought, and insight. It's so tempting, though. I see people the manifesto for X, and they think manifesto is somehow a magic word. And they forget all of the slogging and all of the mistakes and all the pain that went into preparing to be able to say, okay, this is really the distilled essence of what we're talking about. And that's just not gonna, that happens at the speed of people. That's not gonna happen overnight. I wish we could write that, but one, we just don't have enough experience, and two, it's not gonna be us old people who write that. It's gonna be some group of punks who get together and we're gonna be like, no, that's never gonna work. Like we're performing an important service by doing that, but that is our part to play in this future, to go, and every once in a while, like giving them kind of a, that's the best that we can do. So that's why people say, oh, well, I wrote this manifesto, what do you think of it? And I'd say, I think it's 15 years too soon.
Well, that sounds like a great charge for us here. I see this room. Maybe some of us might not be here in 17 years, but I think the charge is to
Wait a minute.
for myself. I'm talking to myself.
Do you know something
I
don't know?
Myself. No, we're going to do this impact lab, starting this afternoon and through tomorrow and the next day. I think that's a great charge for us to lean into experimentation, learning new things. No one has the answers. Any final advice for us to lean into that? Any tips of wisdom?
Cheap experiments. Reversibility is a really valuable concept to understand. If you say, well, you're sitting around, somebody says, well, why don't we just do this crazy sounding thing? And people start laughing. Okay, so there's another tip, which is if people start laughing at an idea, definitely try it. If they're just like, that's not a good sign. But nervous laughter is energy. Ask yourself, okay, if we do this, is it reversible? Can we unlaunch the missile? No. Okay, so we're not going to vibe code that. But if there's a visualization and you think, well, I wish the visualization was like this or it animated like that, try it a little bit, for sure. The stupider the idea is, the more important it is to try it. Because if you try stupid ideas and they happen to work, you have no competition because nobody else is dumb enough to do this. And they're likely to be a jump away from the consensus, local maxima that everybody else is trying. So that's my career is entirely built on trying stupid ideas. Test-driven development, are you kidding me? I want the test to pass. Why would I write the test when it's certain to fail? This is a stupid idea. Yeah, but it's going to take me 5 minutes to try it out and find out. And I spent the 5 minutes, and I just started laughing like a maniac because it was so much less anxiety-producing for me. So, stupid ideas, nervous laughter, but think about reversibility. As long as it's reversible and cheap, everybody should be trying everything.
Sounds great. Let's go do it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great job. Thank you so much.